I did have an interesting experience this week, and it wasn't necessarily having to do with reframing, but what you might identify, how you might identify something, how
Mm-hmm.
you might describe it. And a friend of mine, and you may know who it is because she was in your class, was saying that she told you that she'd never experienced a miracle. I said, "You're kidding me." And so I said, I've got a little journal of them. Well, I didn't flaunt it really like that, but I said,
Yeah.
what things do you think of as miracles? And we talked about that for a little while. But then I went, and then I forgot about the conversation that we had regarding that. So I went to the gas station like everybody else.
Yeah.
Now, I happened to see one that looked like, well, I thought that one's not crowded, maybe. But, I didn't, I don't follow those. If it runs out of gas, it runs out of gas. I mean, So, but I drove in there thinking, well, I got gas, I'll get some. And so I put my card in and everything. And then I noticed, well, then the guy came out and said, well, we don't have any gas. And he said, but your gas tank, whatever you call that closure, is open. I said, yeah, it doesn't close. It's been like that for a couple of years. And he said, now it does. Rosemary, I've had a mechanic who said, well, I'd have to have another part. I had it inspected, and they said, oh, well, we can work on that. Um, I've had people try to resolve that. I've tried. And I thought, well, it's not hurting anything. I'm not going to pay to have it fixed. I'll just leave it. And to me, that was a miracle.
No kidding.
I mean, here we go.
Yeah.
So I thought, well, I've got to call her up and tell her about that miracle and just say, sometimes it's what you might not describe as a miracle. To me, that truly is,
Yes.
and
Yeah.
nobody,
Oh, I think so. Yeah. And it's a wonderful demonstration of, how our frame of mind, how our mindset determines what we see and what we experience.
and it makes such a difference. But it has to do, I think, with maybe appreciation in some ways,
Yes.
or perception and little things, looking at little things like that. Um, I don't know. I see things in the woods that are just like a painting, and I take a photograph of them.
Yeah.
So maybe it's how you look at it.
Well, I mean, that's what we've been talking about for a long time now is the importance of how you look at things.
Yeah. But other than that, I'm pretty skeptical. I've just learned to be that way,
Yeah.
and it's. I think
So
sometimes it's
so
helped me survive.
that guy saw something different when he looked at your gas tank cover than anybody else had.
Exactly. A little service station in Chapel Hill that I used to go to, I thought they'd probably closed. And that was one reason I drove in. It gave me a warm feeling to drive in there.
Hmm.
Um, I used to
And
go there
wow,
all the time.
you didn't get what you were looking for, but you got something else.
Something even better.
Yeah.
So I will call up that person and say, now I had a miracle happen. What do you think of this? Or maybe I won't even call it that. I'll just say, what do you think of this thing? And then
That'll be interesting. Yeah, because, what is a miracle? How do you define a miracle?
there was the $2 tablecloth at Christmas, and how much I wanted a lace tablecloth, and I just had no money for things like that. And I went to Food Lion, and in a package there was a lace tablecloth. It was beautiful,
Wow.
but there was no price on it. I thought, what is it doing in Food Lion anyway? Well, I'm just going to take it to checkout and see how much it is. And I was thinking, I know I can't afford this, but who knows? I'll take it up there. Well, there's no price on it, she says. I think $2.
Cool.
So I got that lace tablecloth. Of course, I love lace. So,
Yeah,
um,
that's wonderful.
yeah, it was. I wrote it in my miracle book for that Christmas.
Wow. Now that's an interesting idea. A miracle book. I
It,
like that.
well, I do it just before Christmas because that seemed to be when these really miraculous things happen.
Hmm,
And maybe it's just when I notice them happening. I don't know. I never
probably.
scrutinized it. It was just like, oh, it's time for the miracles. And that's all it was.
Yeah, well, okay. So that's when you're in the mood for miracles.
It could be. Could be.
Because really, if you look at the laws, it's a flow. And so everything's a miracle, really,
Well,
especially things that are unusual in the pleasure they bring you and the satisfaction.
yeah, you're right. You're right. And synchronicity. I read this week that um, there was one chance, and I believe it was 600 zillion. I forget what that you would be born. I don't know how that was figured out, but
Huh, interesting.
and I've heard that before. How from the Buddhist perspective, how unlikely it is that you will be born. And I thought, wow,
Well,
I better take care of this old body more, or this
well,
young
that's
body.
true. That's very important.
Yeah,
And Myrtle Fillmore, of course, was a wonderful role model in how she loved and appreciated every part of her body.
yes, she did. She did, and but it gave me that feeling again of this is my house here, my house here on earth, for me to take care of and to value and to be respectful of.
Hmm.
So, so
Right.
interesting. So,
Okay, so I was just reading in Butterworth something that I'd never really been aware of before. He was talking in the section on decision, on decisiveness, on the importance of being able to assess a situation and make a decision and stick to it, no matter um, how many doubts you have afterwards. And he was talking about the the U.S. Declaration of Independence, which I'd never thought of it in that context before. That there was a huge bureaucracy with the English crown. Every colony on this continent had a governor in England who was responsible to the king for the obedience of the people in the colony to royal wishes and decrees. And the people in the US, the people we know, Hancock and Adams and Jefferson and the usual suspects, quote unquote, um, served as a mastermind group for each other. And it was all done by planned, they created a group that corresponded with each other because the distances were, you know, huge at that time. Now it's a 10-hour drive to go from New York to North Carolina, for instance, but then it was days, and so they corresponded regularly. There was a correspondent for each of the 13 colonies, one or two. And without telephones, without cell phones, uh, without superhighways, they kept in touch for a couple of years with each other and wrote back and forth. And they were helping each other to become aware of how how they were being used by the king, and it just wasn't right. And eventually, they actually built together the idea that the colonies needed to become independent from England. And the king's rulings, decrees were such that anybody who was guilty of sedition in the colonies would immediately be hanged. And so, in order to write and sign the Declaration of Independence, they had to decide that what they stood for in terms of people, that they, as people living in the 13 colonies, needed freedom to create their own lives and not be dependent on a king on the other side of the ocean. But they knew that by putting their name on that document, that they were immediately putting a target on themselves, and that the state, or the colony governor, could then send a bunch of people out to get them and to hang them. I never thought about, I've seen the document, a facsimile of the document with all the signatures, and I never before realized how amazing it was that all those people were willing, because they belonged to the mastermind group and they had explored this idea, and they had all participated in its development. How amazing it was that all those guys were willing to risk being hanged.
Yes.
Uh,
And even more amazing that they got by with it and had support.
exactly. Yeah. And so what that spoke to for me was the importance of working together with other people as you develop what seems to you is the right thing to do. It's really important to have a community of support. And the concept in Unity has been called a mastermind group. And the minister who really developed it was the minister who was serving Renaissance Unity in Detroit, Michigan. Jack Boland was the one who actually, developed the idea of a mastermind group and how to do it and how to create one, which, as I talk about it, is making me think he wrote long ago that it would probably be possible to find copies of his writings that wouldn't be expensive, so that we could do a whole session, a whole, sequence series on creating and using a mastermind group. But Butterworth uh, saw that the founders of the United States were actually a mastermind group creating an idea and energizing it and courageously making a decision on this is what I stand for and I can't not do it because it's the right thing.
You know, that is an amazing story because I've never really thought about that either. And if I did, I would think they were all together in one room coming up with this. You know,
Yeah,
not
exactly.
that they were
That's
writing.
what I always imagined that, that they that the Continental Congress was the beginning, not the end,
Mm-hmm.
but that was the end point of this 5 or 6 years of idea development. So they put in a lot of reflection, a lot of fact finding, a lot of communication with other people wherever they were. Um, so that when they appointed the the Congress, the Continental Congress, that was an endpoint. That was the result of a very courageous decision on the part of these guys that they were all going to put themselves on a list of people that the king was going to target for execution. And when you think about the courage that must have taken to take that act, I never really reflected on the founding of the United States as an example uh, of creating an idea and using 12 powers and demanding the use of the 12 powers. Obviously, in the Revolutionary War, the stories we know about George Washington's army, it's unbelievable, how they stuck to it. But I'd never thought about the actual Declaration of Independence
I hadn't.
as something that amazing, and to realize how much so many millions of people have benefited from that one mind map or support group.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
That is amazing.
And that was the way that it happened. That doesn't come across in the way history is taught.
Mm, not at all. You see, I can still see the picture in my history book of them all standing together and signing this thing, and that's about as far as it went. It didn't go back to
Right.
communicating by mail for 2 years or however
Yeah,
long it was.
exactly. By courier, I would expect. I don't think mail even existed back then,
Well,
really.
of course,
We're going fast in that direction again.
and how they didn't get intercepted and how they weren't suspected of and maintain confidentiality with the right people. I mean, there's just a lot of things there.
Yeah, exactly. Now, I suppose there probably were, leaks, but part of it is that there was so many people involved that um, that made it a lot harder for the English to suppress the fact that they had people in every one of the colonies. I had never thought about the founding of the United States in the terms that Butterworth described it in. The all of the organizing and planning and communication that happened before the Continental Congress.
Yeah.
I'm not an expert by any means.
In secret, on top of all
Yeah,
that,
I
was in
know.
secret.
But there was like 70 guys across all of that territory. How many people signed the Declaration of Independence?
I don't remember.
I don't
A
remember either.
lot. A
It was a
lot.
lot. Yeah. It was around 70, 75. I don't know. But yeah. So in each one of the 13 colonies, there were a few people who were communicating among themselves. And they also set up a mastermind group, which is a later term. It's anachronistic. It didn't exist when they did it, but it's what they did. They set up a group to really deliberate and communicate and research and be really, really sure that what they said in the Declaration of Independence was really worth risking their lives for, because every single person who signed kind of put a target on his back for the king to hang him.
Yeah.
Because every one of them was disobeying the dictates of the king. And apparently there was a royal governor in each one of the colonies. So the governor had his ear to the ground and would know pretty much what was going on around him. It was all hymns.
Yeah. Well, at least the ones who made any decisions were hymns. They didn't have any problem with using hers to take messages or from one place to another, because women could move about without suspicion. So,
right, that's true.
You're in Savannah and you go visit your cousin in Boston. That's not a big deal.
Although I doubt very many people made that big of a trip back then.
It's surprising, all the stuff that they did. I mean, really surprising.
Totally surprising, yes.
Yeah.
And what Butterworth was talking about was the incredible courage that it took to actually sign that document.
Yeah.
Wow. I never thought about it in those terms. I always pictured Continental Congress, all these guys come together, they sign a piece of paper.
Yeah, they had to do it very, very secretly.
And they planned it for a long time, for a bunch of years before they actually did it. So I found that passage really interesting because it's a beautiful example of using the flow of
and I mean, they took language and ideals that had been buried for centuries, dug them up and based our country on it.
Yep. Yeah.
So, we got Plato and Socrates to thank for a whole bunch of stuff that we enjoy.
Yeah. And
the guys who thought that it didn't matter whose clockmaker you were following.
Right. And I mean, I think that the show written by Lin-Manuel Miranda, Hamilton, did
brilliant, but
did a great job of reminding us who those people were, but the fact that it was so humorous kind of made it not so serious, in people's minds. It was interesting and it was fun,
Yeah, I
but
think parts of it are incredibly serious and heartbreaking.
yeah,
Um,
right.
But yeah, King George is a joke, which is probably pretty much how the colonists felt about.
I suspect so. Yes.
So
And King George basically really was a joke, but he had this
yeah,
whole bureaucracy that was
yeah, no,
dead serious,
yep,
you know. Uh really interesting.
yep, no, they were really on both sides. There were people who risk everything to do what they, in their heart of hearts, thought was right, and that makes it scary because some people were willing to kill other people.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
And then there were ones who were willing to die. I mean,
Mm-hmm. Well,
they
like I
knew
said,
that's what they were signing up for.
right. So
Yeah.
that also, I assume, I'm pretty sure, meant that they might as well die in the war creating the country, because if they lost, they would all die anyway.
Yeah.
It was made it a zero sum game.
And we're talking the majority of those people were between the ages of 17 and 25.
That's a very interesting addition to the perspective.
Mm-hmm.
Aha.
They were very young.
Wow. My
It's like,
grandson's age, not my kids.
yeah, that's like George Washington was old compared to the majority of those people.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Benjamin Franklin was old too.
Yeah, he was ancient and
Right.
weird.
Yeah. Well, actually, another sobering, interesting fact is that life expectancy at that point was probably around 30.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, if you lived to be 42, I suppose you were anxious.
Exactly. Yeah. And that was true way into the 20th century. That the average life expectancy every place, human life expectancy, was at the most 40.
Yeah.
When
the guys who survived lived to be old.
Yeah, exactly. Right. But there weren't that many of them, apparently.
No.
I sort of knew that, but I didn't really until recently, when I read articles about how improvements in medicine have more than doubled the average life expectancy of people. And that's happening now. It's across the world in many places. So the people that we're meeting on Living Peace now are basically probably only the second generation in their places who can expect to live long enough to make a university education worthwhile.
Yeah.
Which is an amazing thing to realize. Wow. Still not true in places like Mali and Afghanistan and Iraq. I look at Syed and his wonderful generosity in devoting himself to educating the orphans. And his life expectancy is, really not very long.
Yeah.
He's 23 now. If he lives to 30, he'll be amazing.
Yeah, we have a responsibility to share our good fortune, share our knowledge, share.
Right.
I don't think that in the United States right now, I think 2/3 of the people would think sharing's a good thing, but they're not the 2/3 that are in power.
Right. Or at
So,
least, yeah.
Yeah,
It is
America
about 2/3.
first is really upsetting.
Well, yeah, especially since they call themselves Christians.
Yeah.
When they're opposite. But yeah, I mean, certainly one of the things I'm learning in working with these people across the world, these young people across the world, is wow, how dramatically their possibilities have recently changed.
Right. And
And
I think that across Africa, the new ways to purify water is incredibly important in their life expectancy.
yeah, exactly.
Just purified water, and that is so minor to Americans who would not think,
Well, it's
except for the people in Michigan.
well, yeah.
There's
It's
some
not it's of course not minor. It's
No, it is the most important.
it is very essential. Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're right. It's not something we appreciate.
Yeah.
It's interesting all the all the things we can learn that make us appreciate more.
To take time every day to go within and become aware of the creative process in the universe, specifically as it relates to giving.
Aha. Okay. Did we talk last week about how the flow of energy in the universe is pouring through us, is ready to pour through us always, as long as we can get out of its way. And that's not necessarily an easy thing to try to do, to get out of its way.
Well, that's how I started out, was with this assignment, but then it got into the miracle thing.
Okay. Well, the fact is that, miracles are always ready to happen as long as we believe.
And I think that a lot of miracles happen all the time, every day, to everyone, and we miss them.
Yeah.
We just plain don't see it.
Right. Karen and I started out talking about that.
Yeah, it's like,
exactly.
Okay, I am so frustrated I didn't get out of the house on time. And I have no idea that had I gotten out of the house on time, I would have been in a head-on collision with a truck that was run away. So that is a miracle. I mean, but until you're so frustrated and so angry, and then you get down to the road and there's this huge crash and you go, oh my gosh, if I had been here the 5 minutes earlier that I had planned to be here, that
yeah.
So it really changes your perspective about getting frustrated about things.
Yes. Yep. And whenever I do consciously practice gratitude, there's no end of things to be grateful for in every single moment. I can use all the time and more being aware of things, always, no matter how crummy I'm feeling otherwise. It's really an interesting realization how powerful our chosen attitude can be in determining what we experience. Anyway, we're talking basically about the importance of not blocking that flow. And Butterworth made the point that one of the biggest ways that we block the flow for ourselves is in, being wishy-washy about making up our mind and acting. Well, maybe I don't want to do that now. I think I'd rather go have a snack. Or I'd rather watch the news. Or, I don't know, what are yours? Your tools for procrastination.
Go for a walk.
Go for a walk, okay?
I read. I would rather read as think about anything.
Right.
And that includes reading in the flow.
Yeah.
Some
things are actually useful to read.
Yeah, but
that isn't what
this idea of keep challenging myself with not being afraid of change, because change is all there is, really resonated with me.
Yeah.
Because I wouldn't have said I was afraid of change, but then technically I am.
I think all of us are.
But no, I'm thankful for all the challenges. I'm not thankful when I have too much input in order to make a reasonable decision.
Yeah, and I think that's where having a mastermind group is very helpful.
Yeah.
As we were in the spectator seat over the last month for Ramadan, that was really interesting, because somehow the traditions, the Islamic traditions, not the rules so much, but how they've lived with the rules, is brilliant for keeping participation going. So they took this really difficult practice of not eating for I don't know, 14, 15 hours every day.
You don't eat while the sun is shining. You can't eat.
Turned it into a fabulous month-long party.
Yeah.
I mean, who would want to be left out of that? But in order to participate, you got to do the fast. It is brilliant. So the first thing that struck me was, well, geez, if I was going to fast all through daylight every day for a month, I would not be looking forward to that as a happy time. I would be dreading it. And instead, it struck me that all of them were like, oh, wow, Ramadan's coming. This is going to be great. What on earth? And then I learned a little bit.
Yeah, it's them. Like every day is Mardi Gras. Once it gets dark.
Exactly. So then they party all night and sleep all day. Yeah. Not quite, but that's close. And when I found out that Syed was teaching his classes from 2 a.m. to 6 a.m., like, oh my gosh. Wow.
Yeah, flips everything on its head.
It does. But like I say, it's brilliant use of human psychology.
Yeah.
And I guess things that really succeed do manage to use human psychology brilliantly. They make people feel good. And that is certainly a level of overcoming that amazes me. Wow. So you can see how anything can be possible. That's very interesting.
Yeah, I don't think we have anything quite like it.
No, well, we had Lent, but we didn't know enough to make Lent fun.
No, Lent is pain.
Exactly. And the Christian psychology was, well, if you've hurt now, you'll feel better in some mythic afterlife.
Yeah, that's not very fulfilling though.
Exactly. And I think each of the Abrahamic religions has delved into one aspect of the divine more than the other aspects. So the Jews became experts on law and on arguing about law.
Yeah.
They raised that to a fine art. Oh my God.
Yeah, and it's fascinating to read. I love reading some of those Mishnah and the Talmudic writings. They're fascinating.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so that is one aspect of divine mind. And Jesus really plumbed the depths of love and what is love and what we can make love and how loving, no matter what, makes everything better. And that's the genius of Christianity. It's hard to believe sometimes
if people would follow it. Yes.
Well, it's hard to follow. Yeah.
It is.
And Islam really focused on enjoyment. And their genius is how to make anything enjoyable.
Mm-hmm.
Pleasure, which is also an aspect of the divine. Mm-hmm. So it's always fascinated me the different perspectives of these three major traditions and how each of them pursued one aspect of divinity to the exclusion of others. But I have to say the Islamic one has a lot to be said for it.
Especially if you're a man.
Well, yeah. But in fact, early Islam did not discriminate against women.
I know. And neither did early Christianity.
Right.
But
yep.
Humans aren't made that way.
Apparently not.
Because apparently not, because it doesn't matter how well-meaning at the start, it becomes restrictive somehow. Every one of them becomes restrictive somehow. And then they have to go back and rediscover their roots and their beginnings to find something.
Yep. Yeah, it's an ongoing struggle, isn't it?
Yeah, it's like, okay, well, that's not the way it was. Let's go back and look and see what happened.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's easy to see what happened, and other times it's impossible to see what happened. You just see the results, not the impetus or,
right.
But
And yeah, it's all about the negative polarities and people wanting more for themselves. Yeah. I'm finding the whole thing really interesting. And the hugeness of the basic, the basic conflicts, the universality of them, and of the possibilities too. The positive possibilities. Wow. So again, coming back to what Butterworth was talking about, his point in this chapter was very definitely, okay, in order to succeed and create what you really believe you want, you got to be able to know the difference between opinion and fact. And we know that sometimes that gets really challenging. I think that our country right now is going through a real challenge to what is fact.
Yeah, it has been for going on 5 years.
At least in this iteration of it.
Yeah, in this one, your basic trust of who is telling you facts and who is making things up is really polarized.
Exactly. And it's interesting that the role, for instance, that social media plays in that, birds of a feather flock together, which we've always known, but technology, social media technology, makes it possible for us to apply that across every aspect of living.
Right, and instantly.
Yeah.
I think the instant part takes away the brain's time to absorb it and check it. So you don't have time to check it. You either agree or disagree.
Right.
There's not any.
Yeah. And
there's not any process in there.
It's not that easy. I was looking this morning. I think it was on the New York Times. I'm not sure. But it was a huge collection of political cartoons from the last month or so. So it was a beautiful example of how different artists conceptualized the people and the events that were reported. So cartoons that came from very conservative, Trumpy media were really devastating in the way that they portrayed the people that, as a liberal, I think of as heroes. It was clear that, the people reading this cartoon and the person drawing this cartoon saw Biden and the Democrats as villains.
Right.
And it was very interesting. And that's been missing from that opportunity to see everybody portrayed either as a villain or a hero. And that we haven't had that here for at least 5 years more. So it was refreshing, actually. to see the diversity of views. The facts were the same. It was just the way that the people were portrayed. It was so interesting.
Everything we have comes through our perception.
Yep.
So perception is what makes things real or unreal or true or not true.
Right.
And until we can step outside of our own given perception and look at it all, we're stuck. So
yeah, we
we're
are
not in the flow.
Right. But I think running all those cartoons together,
yeah,
and just presenting them as these were the political cartoons in major publications over the last month, and not sorting them, restored an important perspective to our experience of looking at those cartoons, because we got to see the people that we like as villains, as nasties, and seeing the people we don't like as, portrayed benevolently. It was interesting. It was very interesting. And that's really what we need to go back to somehow, is being able to, it used to be that the ideal of a journalistic outlet was that they presented two sides.
right.
They don't do that anymore.
No, they don't.
We need to get back to that somehow.
Yeah.
So that, because my experience is that when I've been talking to people who turned out to be the enemy, social conservatives, we can talk for a long time. We're using the same words and they mean something totally opposite. But the conversation is surreal because we're both using the same vocabulary and not meaning the same thing at all.
Yeah.
And we got to get away from that. We got to go back to one vocabulary.
Yeah, I think that at the point where Jews and Christians split, which was approximately 90 BCE, what happened was language split. The terms they use the same term for, like, salvation, for example, same word.
Yeah.
Means completely different things. So, now we're seeing that in government. And when you look at sociology with the where you go from hunter-gatherers and then you go to the big man who takes over everything and tells everybody what to do, it's just the same things that happened before are happening still, just in a bigger playing field.
Right.
So, I think right now we have big man theory of sociology going on in our country.
Yeah, we've kind of gone backwards.
Yeah.
Because the tribal era, originally was a couple of thousand years ago.
Yeah.
And then, came law and rule. And then came collaboration. And
yeah, I'd like to stick with that.
I know, but we've gone backward now, back into tribal.
Yeah.
Where, it's all about words setting off emotional responses rather than having well thought out laws that we follow. So I guess that
Accumulation is a problem too.
it is, yes.
That is a tribal impetus, is accumulation. The one who has the most is
the best. Yeah.
And I think that, at least in our country, for probably 3/4 of a century, that has been, we have returned to that ideal. And
Yeah.
it had gone away. It had been taken care of with unions and labor laws and things like that. And
it had been
going backwards,
a lot closer to taking care of.
Yeah.
It never went away.
No, none of the things went away. They go underground for a while, but
right.
But it's surprising to see them appear so vehemently.
Yeah, it is. As long as we're here in this material dimension, things go around and they come around. Interesting.
Yeah, in chapter 8, I really like the part about retirement and enforced leisure being negative.
That's true.
It defeats their own goals, because if you enforce yourself not to do stuff, if you're not growing, you
start falling apart. Exactly.
Yeah. So I really like that. We have to keep going forward with some kind of new creative activity in order to stay vital.
Right.
And that really resonated with me.
The importance of being able to make a decision and keep following it. And, choose, commit, really study and, act on making the decision and actually doing things. You cannot really make a wrong choice. That's really true. So we agonize over making mistakes, and I've experienced that really. In the long haul, whatever decision we make, we work with, and it all boils down to the same challenges.
Yeah. My favorite thing out of that chapter was the learning to think vertically and not just horizontally.
Right.
So you deal with the transcendent as well as the human logic.
Yes. Right.
That makes a lot of sense to me, because really that's how I make my decisions. No matter how many choices I have or how many variables there is to put in, I can't just figure it out on a human level. I have to go to does this make sense vertically as well? So
I think the important principle in that chapter is the idea of 3 states of mind: the subconscious, the conscious, and the superconscious, which are not Freudian definitions. They're Freudian terms, but they're defined differently. The superconscious is when we are aware of not only the human, but also the universal, the allness, the universality of everything, really. And the subconscious is the negative and the superconscious is positive, and we can, we flip back and forth among all three, and we could also call those three states of mind the third dimension, the fourth dimension, and the fifth dimension. And the third dimension is where all possibilities of negative outcomes exist. Once you get above the third dimension, that polarity, that, opposites thing goes away, and everything is positive, really. So we're fascinated by the diversity that's possible in the third dimension. And in the fifth dimension, only good exists, which is a different level of awareness.
I remember when my mom, maybe 30 years ago, signed me up for Daily Word. She wrote me a note with it, and she goes, I want you to do these devotionals.
Okay.
But these people are always happy and only happy, so don't forget it's not all like that.
Well, she's right. I mean, in the fifth dimension, it is all like that.
Yeah. And it may not be all like that, but I like putting that part in my head and holding it because it does make everything better.
Right. So why not?
Yeah. But, that was her Baptist reaction. It's like, these devotionals are great. I want you to use them, but don't forget everything is sin.
That's really funny.
Yeah.
And it's true that some people really are attached to the negative possibilities.
Yeah, no,
they call it real.
Yeah, it's like
the real truth.
Don't tell your daughter that she's the most wonderful, beautiful, smartest thing in the world, because when she finds out she's not, she'll be disappointed in herself. And I just was like, no, she is the most smartest, the most beautiful.
Which is true of every person.
Yes. It's like, so no, I am not going to not tell her that. Of course, I'm going to tell her I love her every day and that she's beautiful and smart. And now she has her doctorate to prove it. So.
Yep.
It just, if I didn't think it was true, I couldn't have said it, but it's part of my truth, and I wanted it to be part of her truth.
Good.
So
that works.
If it's not part of my mom's truth, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I mean,
well, frankly, I think that many more people have become willing to entertain the idea that, that we can make things better. We're not condemned to always be in the negative.
Yeah.
I think that's part of the evolving awareness, consciousness of people worldwide.
I think that's true. And I'm hoping that by living in that and demonstrating that others will catch on. Because I don't think you can hit them over the head and make them catch on. But I think that, and I'll go back to the Baptist word, witnessing, by having your life be what you think life ought to be, and they go, well, wow, what's going on with you?
Yeah, well, I'm witnessing.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's like, okay, so yes, I'm living my truth, and I'm being my authentic self, and I'm um, very happy to bring you all along.
And we're very happy to be making that journey with you.
It's just like it's it's fun. To be positive is fun. To be
Yeah,
negative is not so much fun.
very well said. And based on that, I always say life is supposed to be fun.
Yeah, I think so. I think the things that feel good and make you happy, as long as they're not hurting somebody else, are intended. So,
Right. And how can hurting someone else make you feel good?
well, apparently it can for some people.
Apparently it can for some people, yeah, but that's I find that hard to grok.
Yeah, they've got a twist somewhere that needs to be, or an unbalance in something.
Yep. Separated.
So, you know,
I mean that's really what evil is it's not connected. Karen, any thoughts to
yeah,
onto
throw it.
this pile?
I'm just listening.
You're really good at
Or
listening,
as
Karen.
far, yeah, I am. I like to listen. As far as what evil is, I, I've struggled with that one. I don't believe in evil. I just don't believe in evil.
Okay. But how about separation?
Yeah, I do believe. I do believe that people feel that way, feel separated, but
And I think personally, I think that when I'm feeling separate and not part of the whole, then, what I can get all twisted up in terms of what is good and what is evil
I believe that.
because I know that no matter who I talk to, and if I ask them about what they're doing, they always have a reason why what they're doing is good. Always. But if somebody is disconnected from, their compass, then it's easy to get confused because something can seem good when it's you against others, which is what the state of separation is. It's when you feel not part of, but separate from and embattled by or with. And in that context, everything's different.
I think that when I said, I think there are some evil outcomes, such as with Hitler and the Jews,
Oh, yeah,
but I don't
absolutely.
think that the people who participated, even as drastic as it was and as horrible, horrific, I don't think that there was a person who was just evil.
Right.
Um, but in looking at the situation, it would appear that way to get joy out of seeing someone else hurting because that's what happened.
That's true.
When the Jews were persecuted, the 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 Germans who were doing it, got seemed to get joy out of it. But
Mhm.
I don't think so. The whole thing was a myth,
Yeah, it
something
was an
they
illusion.
believed. Yes.
And the illusion was that skin color and inheritance made some people bad.
hmm It was fear.
Yeah. And it was separation, because when we're feeling separate, then we're afraid, because we're actually not separate. But sometimes we get into that delusion.
Now, that doesn't mean I'm going to put myself out in the world and, as someone who would do evil and say, here I am, I don't believe in evil. It's not like that kind of thing.
Right.
So I go back to the, separation and
Mhm.
the illusion and
Right.
the things that we believe.
And, it's really important to have some I can only think of the term in French, compass points, where you have something to go by as to what's up and what's down. I'll never forget an experience I had that was scary. It was in the Swiss Alps in March 20, 25 years ago, 25 or 30 years ago. We had taken a tour, my ex-husband and I, and for spring break. So it was, still kind of wintry in the Alps. And what was weird was there was a lot of snow and there was still a lot of storms. And when you went above, the very lowest elevation, the air was white because of all the snow, and the ground was white because of all the snow. And we went up in a tram, to get to, it was a ski slope, but, we were at the top. And we got out of the tram car, and you couldn't see any more than that far. And got out of the tram car and had no idea which way was the cafe. There was a huge building right there, but you couldn't see it. And, I was like the first one out of the car. And I was just standing there thinking, holy cow, which direction do I go in? I knew it was no more than 20 or 30 steps. But in 20 or 30 steps, I could also find myself falling down a slope that I also couldn't see. There was no path. There was nothing visible. It was a total whiteout.
Hi, everyone.
Hi, Pedro. Good to see you. So, it's really, you really need to have some kind of point of connection to know which way is up, which way brings you to the shelter and which way brings you over the edge.
Yeah, I've heard that divers in water, when you can't tell which way's up and which way is down.
Right. Exactly. And that could be fatal.
Yeah.
You really need some point of reality. We started out talking about recognizing good and evil, and that evil is based on a dream or a delusion. It comes from not having a point or a couple of points to know which direction is the right direction, which is the safe direction, which direction will bring you to what you want to experience. And it's really scary when you don't have any points of identification. So that can be true, in regard to good and evil, when you're separated from all guidelines and you don't have anything to follow. it's hard to tell what's good and what's evil because you're just lost. And that can happen to us emotionally, can happen to us spiritually if we are disconnected from our inner guidance. That's, that can be a really scary experience.
What did you? I'm just curious. What did you do? What was your next step in that story?
My next step was to call out because I knew that there were other people getting off the tram. Somebody must have known which way to go. And, people called back to me and said, okay, turn left and go 3 steps. I don't know what they said, but that was how I found the other people and who, as a group, knew which way they were supposed to go. This was an experience that I had, Pedro, in Switzerland on a very, 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 very cloudy day. And I took the ski lift, the tram up to the top. And when I got out of the car, I couldn't see anything because everything was white. The air was white, the ground was white. It was all snowy. And without having some evidence of which way I was going to find the building and safety, it was, I didn't know what to do. I was lost, even though I was right there. It doesn't take a lot to get us lost sometimes.
Yeah.
So directional signs are helpful, and being able to see around us and to connect with other people is really important. So we've run out of time. Pedro, you came just as we were about to finish. We've been on for an hour and a half, since noon. So it's wonderful to see you, but we're going to say goodbye.
No problem. I, I'm because I need to pay supermarket.
Okay.
Sorry.
Yeah. So hope we did record this, so you can find it on the forums on the site. It will be recorded there and it'll be posted tomorrow. So we're going to move on next week to chapter 5, The Art of Getting Along, which you've read a long time ago, Lisa, I gather.
Yep.
Okay.
How?
So.
Excuse me. How your life next week?
Okay. So next Friday at
Okay.
noon New York time.
Okay.
I don't know what time that is where you are. Are you in Brazil? You're in Brazil.
In Brazil, and in 4 hours after.
Okay, so at 4 in the afternoon.
Okay.
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 Good. So what should we work on this week? I guess I'm thinking about light and needing some way to always be able spiritually to orient ourselves so we know that we're connected. So let's focus on connection and what we use in our life as indicators of which way we are working on going in terms of being in the flow. How do we find the flow? Okay?